Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Parish of Cove. My name is Jay. It is a delight for me to be here with us today on the 19th of December. Very, very close. And this is going to be my final Advent reflection. It's a delight to have been here, and I've got my little Christmas box. I'm back from work, as you'll see. The last time I was doing this, I was in work in what looked like a very bare office, I can tell you. I've got some nice bright walls there. But in my box today, I have got an old book. And I've got an old book. And one of the things I love about old books is it's that sound they make when you open it up. It's like slightly crispy of the pages sort of being together. They haven't been opened for a while. There's that yellowing of the paper. There's all this amazing script. Look at that. And just the smell that comes from it as well. And inside you get a little taste of history, don't you? And on the inside of this book, if I can find it, is someone's name. I can't find it now. That's always the way with live stuff. Here it is, just inside. There we go. G. Harry Smith. No idea who he is. But the date on this is July the 21st, 1906. Something that's been written there in 1906. Not the last words, but words that I know, the last words I know of Harry Smith, G. Harry Smith, written, 114 years ago. I just want to read, it's actually part of the Century Bible series, and this is the one on the Minor Prophets. And the passage that we're looking at today is in Luke 1, one of the first books of the New Testament, and it refers back to one of the last words that was spoken by God to his people. And I'm just going to read it here, because it's from, this is the book of the Minor Prophets, and I'm just going to read a little section from Malachi. So Malachi says, and this is the word of the Lord speaking through the prophet Malachi, speaking to his people, saying, "Behold, I," that's God, "will send you Elijah the prophet, and he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers." And those are pretty much the words that the Old Testament closes on before the New Testament begins in Matthew with the birth of Jesus. And you have this gap of 400 years where there is silence. 400 years where there are no words spoken of God to his people. There is this period of waiting. There is this Advent, this period of waiting. And then we have God speaking into the world and sending his son. The story in Luke that I'm reflecting on today is about Zecariah. And Zecariah, we believe, or we know that he was a priest. There's a possibility that he might have been the high priest. And in the temple, you had these various different courts, and it was almost like a journey. And a journey from the outer courts, from the outer world, all the way through the inner courts and the different places of worship, to what was known as the Holy of Holies. And the Holy of Holies was where God's presence resided. And once a year, the high priest would go in and would offer sacrifices to atone for sin of his people, of God's people. And we think that there is a possibility that Zechariah was a high priest. If not, he was certainly a priest. And on this day, he is in the temple offering sacrifices. He is putting he's putting incense next to the altar. And suddenly there is this vision, and the angel Gabriel, who is one of the high angels, is standing next to the altar, and he tells him, and he echoes these words from Malachi. He says, you and your wife, who are both in your 80s, will have a son. You will call him John, and he will bring the father to the children and the children to the father. And so there's that gap of 400 years between those words being uttered and then the echo in time 400 years later. And John, who is a priest, he's of the priestly tribe, says, how do I know that what you're telling me is true? Now, if he's the high priest, and if he's in this position of the Holy of Holies, or even if he's well into the temple area, wherever he is, he has got an angel of the Lord standing before him, saying and echoing these words. And he says, how do I know that you're true, that that's going to happen? And Gabriel turns around and says, well, look, here's who I am. I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and God himself has sent me to tell this story to you, to tell you these words. And you will not be able to speak until this comes to pass, to know that it was true. And about 10 months later, John the Baptist, as we know him, is born. And John, Steve was speaking yesterday about his middle name being John, and the name John means God is gracious. And we can look at that in two ways. God is gracious to his people. After 400 years, he's speaking and he's bringing about this new thing through Jesus and is redeeming his people unto himself. And he's gracious also to Zechariah and to Elizabeth, who in their old age are having a baby. And there are some beautiful words from Elizabeth later on, which I would encourage you to read. So God is gracious. And I think the big thing for me on this is God speaks. There's this 400-year gap. And at this moment, God speaks into a place where it's the Holy of Holies, where his presence lives and stays. And we can fast forward. There was this big curtain that would separate the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple, from the rest of the people. And we know that when Jesus died on the cross, 33 odd years later, that curtain was torn in two and God's presence flooded the earth. And I want to say today that God speaks today. He speaks to you, he speaks to me. He doesn't need to speak to anyone with any particular education. God speaks. He wants to speak to his people because he is gracious. And I guess my question here is, how do we approach that? And how do we react when God speaks to us? Now, he may not send the angel Gabriel to us in whatever that situation may have looked like. But we know that Zechariah stood there and said, how do I know that this is true? How do I know that God is faithful? How do I know that this is going to come to pass? He was silenced for 10 months or so. For a baby to be born is 9 months. My wife was a midwife. I should know that. There's time. There are gaps of time. But God is faithful. He was faithful yesterday, today, and forever. He is the same. He never changes. And we know that God is gracious. So I'm going to say goodbye now. This is the last one that I'm doing for our Advent reflections. I've been loving to see the journey that we've been on, that you've been on. I hope this has been helpful to you. I wish you a very peaceful Christmas. It is going to look different. But I trust that where God speaks to you, we may have ears to hear and to say yes. Amen.